Hey everybody, welcome to the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast, where the Force will be with you. If the Force is pro wrestling statistics, we will always be with you. I am Griff from GA, and joining me is a debutant. We haven't had one of these in quite a few weeks now, but it is Jacob from Pro Wrestling Musings, also known as the Salt of however many Twitter followers he happens to have at the time. And if you just follow him on Twitter, then you can find out exactly why. But we are here. We are talking about AEW Dynamite, and I always say that, you know, the best things always begin at the beginning, but in this case, the best pro wrestling statistics podcast will begin at the end with, of course, the main event, Jungle Boy versus Kenny Omega for the AEW World Championship. Everyone was talking about this match, and for good reason, and we are going to help you figure out exactly why this match was so great, because that's what wrestling statistics do. We don't just analyze for analyzation's sake, whether that's a word or not, I don't know, but we actually can explain to you why this match was so much fun. So let's get into that. Jacob, the first thing I'm going to ask you, I mean, I think it's kind of already out there whether or not you enjoyed the match. So let me ask you this. What specifically from this match stood out to you that helped you enjoy it the way that pretty much everyone did?
Man. Hi, by the way. I'm new. Hello. Gosh, this match, it just, the way Kenny Omega can work his opponent into the structure of his style of match, it never ceases to amaze me. The one thing that like really stood out about this match from beginning to end is Kenny Omega working in Jungle Boy's hair, just like, because in the build-up, he'd make like little off comments about his hair, and then right at the very beginning, he has the moment where he's like, "Oh, I'm touching your hair. Get the hair out of your face. Isn't this precious hair?" And then that ties in to the very end, after Jungle Boy gets a roll-up. That just this roll-up, like no one thought Jungle Boy was gonna win this match, but this roll-up at the end out of a one-winged angel, it got me.
You thought it might be coming home right there. I'm with you.
Really did. But normally when that happens and it's a younger guy like Jungle Boy, it's just like, I didn't get him. Oh no, I'm going to take a bunch of time to screw myself out of a win here because I'm young and I almost got the win. But no, he goes right into the snare trap. And then Kenny Omega has to grab the hair to get out of the snare trap. And just that through line, it's something so minor that Kenny Omega adds to his matches that I'm always impressed by.
Yep, I absolutely agree. I will say this. AEW, from the very beginning, they said, we're going to be a sports-focused wrestling company. That's what they really wanted to do. And there's been some criticism from a lot of people, including a lot of people at Pro Wrestling Musings, when it comes to that sports focus kind of thing. What exactly do they mean? You know, the fact that sometimes they've actually used Pro Wrestling Musings statistics before. That's actually how I found this place, was AEW using these statistics. But it's not really consistent. They don't always go with it. This match, this is exactly why AEW is a sports-focused wrestling company, even though they may not always show it in terms of how they present the content. But this is exactly what I mean. Ask yourself right now, Jungle Boy lost his opportunity at the World Championship. Is he hurt by this? No, absolutely not. No one would say that this hurts Jungle Boy. This elevates Jungle Boy. Why? Because AEW, it's ironic, by making wins and losses matter, it means that you can lose and still be okay. Because everyone understands that you are allowed to lose in pro wrestling. And so that's the reason why Jungle Boy can lose and still look better. And that's exactly what happened here. Now, this was a phenomenal week for Jungle Boy, I think it must be said. He has shown that he is an incredible promo. I mean, look, a lot of people already knew this, but to do it at this level, you're going up against Kenny Omega, one of the best of the generation, if not one of the greatest of all time. So everything is magnified. He showed that he's a great promo. He's a great character. He's a phenomenal wrestler. He is a babyface's babyface. Obviously the fans are behind him. He is going to be a world champion at some point. Don Callis even said that. This is a guy who works for Kenny Omega. who literally said Jungle Boy's going to be a world champion at some point. Also, he appears to be in a relationship with Anna Jay. So, look, pretty solid week, I think, for Jungle Boy.
The guy's having a great week right now.
This is a marquee week in the life of Jungle Boy. But look, I mean, this match was so good. I wanna take your attention right now to this graph. I want to talk about this 3-minute offense interval graph. This is one of my favorite things that we do on PWM, and it's because you can read so much from this. Look at the way this graph moves. Both these guys, accumulatively, they just increase as the match goes on, right? I mean, just especially Kenny. He just gets more and more offense in as the match goes on, and yet Jungle Boy is still able to make his comeback. You can't do that every match, but the one match when you do it, it means that comeback happens so fast, and Kenny Omega is realizing that comeback is happening and trying to play catch up, and Jungle Boy just outworks him. He just flat out outpaces him during this comeback, which is something that very, very few people can actually do to Kenny Omega, which once again just puts over Jungle Boy in this moment. Kenny Omega becomes the first person to cleanly escape from the snare trap. He did it the first time when he reached the ropes. Is that okay? Absolutely, because it's Kenny Omega. He's the world champion. If anyone's going to do it, it would be him. But then the second time, he can't do it cleanly. And then Jungle Boy's given up. He's given everything to get to that point. Kenny Omega needs to cheat to escape from the snare trap. And then Omega just does Kenny Omega things. Tiger Driver, One Winged Angel. Obviously, it's over. This match was great. It put Jungle Boy over as a babyface. Kenny Omega's a heel, but it just kind of plays into this thing where, you know, he cheats and he does all this other stuff, but he's still the best wrestler on the planet, right? And they're still kind of planting that seed and making you remember, yeah, Kenny Omega's still the best wrestler in the world right now, even though he's working through all these injuries that have been reported and everything else. This was a great babyface heel match. Jungle Boy specifically, great babyface. That's what I learned over everything else from this.
Yeah. Well, one thing I said on Twitter is this might be a contender for my match of the month at the very least. Mm-hmm. And I got a lot of people saying, well, like, you have Shingo Takagi versus Okada in Japan. And one thing I'll say about these types of AEW main events versus like a New Japan main event that I love about them is that they have this way of just distilling all of this action and drama that you would get from like a New Japan match, which is obviously where Omega comes from, into this like 17-minute banger. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, it doesn't feel like you're missing 20 minutes from a match, even though the quality of a New Japan match comes from the slow build and then all of the action in like the last 15 minutes.
Yep.
You get all of that in one small package.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the fact that it's Kenny Omega who's able to do it, a guy who has put on two of the greatest matches of all time, both of which are 45 minutes or longer. Both of them happen obviously against Okada. We've been talking a lot about that on Pro Wrestling Musings over the last couple of weeks. The fact that it's not just this proves to me. I've heard some people, and I don't often like talking about this because I don't think these people are genuine, but I've heard some people say that Kenny Omega, he was carried by Okada in those matches. Okada's a much better wrestler than Kenny Omega. The reason why those matches were so good is because both men are incredible wrestlers. Okada has gone on to have, again, some fantastic matches after that. And now Kenny Omega, what he shows in matches like this is that he understands pro wrestling. He understands why those matches were so good. And so he just picks out the things that were great and then just condenses them, like you said, into 15 or 20 minutes. And that's what he's been doing in AEW. And when he needs to add 10 onto that Iron Man match with Pac, which is in contention for one of the best Dynamite matches of all time, he can do that too. He can distill it into 30, or he can distill it into whatever, 25, whatever his match with Phoenix was, which remains my favorite Dynamite match of all time. Kenny Omega just knows professional wrestling. He just knows what he's doing. And not only does he know what he's doing, but like you said at the very beginning, he does it in such a way that he's bringing the other guy up to his level. I've used this analogy before, but when we talk about basketball, the greatest players of all time make everyone else around them better. That's what Kenny Omega does. Just by being in the ring with Kenny Omega, you are now a better professional wrestler. And let's be real, for Jungle Boy, he didn't need to be elevated. He already was a tremendous talent. We already knew that. But he's just that much better being in there with Kenny.
Absolutely. Just watching Kenny Omega transition into an American weekly style schedule and taking everything he's learned from Japan and transitioning it into this condensed weekly, it's very satisfying to watch, even because I think a lot of people thought he couldn't do it, but I think he's done it very well. Everyone has a favorite Dynamite match, and Omega is in everyone.
That's absolutely right. You'd be hard pressed to find someone whose favorite Dynamite match does not involve Kenny Omega, and it just says it all about the guy. Honestly, I want to say one more thing about this match. Craig has done something that I really like here over on ProWrestlingMusings.com. The statistics article for this Dynamite, he went into more detail on Jungle Boy versus Kenny Omega, and one of the things that he did was a graphic comparing their 2021 averages versus this particular match. If you remember the last episode of the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast, we did a preview about this match, and we used those averages. And so now we can go back and look at this match compared to that. And one thing that just stands out to me from the very beginning, Kenny Omega, there are 3 categories where, well, technically 4, but 3 that I want to talk about right now, where his average, he was above average in this match. Pin attempts, fouls, and taunts. So physically, right off the bat, what is he telling you? He's got to pin more, he's more desperate to win. He's got to foul more, Jungle Boy's getting the better of him, and he's got to taunt more, he's got to take breaths against Jungle Boy. Just physically, these are not things that you would ever know without these statistics, but these are certainly things that you notice. And specifically in the case of fouls, he doubled his 2021 average. When you take it on an hourly basis, he's averaging 15 an hour. If this match had been 1 hour, he would have had 31. He needed to cheat against Jungle Boy. And it's these little things, these little stories being told that tell you, yeah, Jungle Boy is on this level. He can beat Kenny Omega. You don't need some kind of crazy booking in order to put Jungle Boy here. You just need a guy who's over. Jungle Boy has gotten himself over. And then a guy in Kenny Omega who is a masterful storyteller in the ring, and just let him tell this story. And this is exactly what you get.
And that ties into the story they were telling in the build-up as well, with Omega. He's basically talking down to Jungle Boy because he's afraid of him. And that's what Christian pointed out when he was talking to Jungle Boy before this match in a promo backstage, is that Kenny Omega knew Jungle Boy was a threat to his title. And that's what these stats tell you, with him going for more fouls, going for more pin attempts. He wanted to put this guy away because he had talked so much in the build-up that he wanted to prove that he was correct, even though he knew he wasn't. He knew the guy was going to be a threat.
You're absolutely right, and this is not the first time he's done this. This actually stood out to me during his series with Okada, Omega's series with Okada. He did this same thing to Okada, where he was talking a big game. It was right in the middle of the Bullet Club story, and so he kept talking about how dominant he was and how dominant Bullet Club was. But you can see specifically in his foul rate against Okada, it just goes down. The longer that those matches go, the longer that rivalry goes, the foul rate just goes down. So Kenny's still talking, he's jawing all this, but he knows that in order to beat Okada, in order to do this, he has to do something else. So that disconnect between what he's saying and what he's doing physically, Kenny is, he's a master of so many things. And this one in particular really helps him tell a physical story because he is so out there. He's so emotive when he talks. He draws criticism from some people for his promos, because they say, well, it's over the top. And the stuff with Jungle Boy where he's talking about the knuckle sandwiches and all that stuff, it's over the top. But the whole point is so that you understand in your head when you're watching this match that physically, Kenny Omega is a lot different than what he said he was going to do coming into this thing, which again is just evidence of a guy who understands the fundamentals of pro wrestling.
Absolutely. Like you said, he's a master of a lot of things. One of those things is being able to act a certain way while what he's saying is completely the opposite. So being able to convey that he's scared of someone while talking utter nonsense to them. I think it's one of the reasons a lot of people get confused about him, but it's one of those things that make him someone who everyone calls the best.
Yep. And it's why I'm so glad to be doing this and working for Pro Wrestling Musings and being able to talk about this, because we can actually quantify what that looks like and actually show you, without just making a contention, we can actually show you on paper why these things work the way they do and why it actually looks like this. I want to ask you this question before we move on and talk about the rest of Dynamite. One thing that kind of came to my mind as just the fantasy booking part of me was wondering, AEW, one of the things, if you remember back to the Sting, Darby Allin versus Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky tag match, one of the things that I really loved about it was they did the fake hot tag spot in AEW, where the referee misses the hot tag and they got to send Sting back. And it really stood out to me because I'm like, that is an old school spot, and they never use that. But they used it here, and it was really effective. So it got me thinking, what do you think about potentially a dusty finish during Omega's title reign? I understand that, it's very old school. In the modern age, it may not work, but I was just thinking during this, I'm like, man, you want to get nuclear heat for Omega? Do a dusty finish with someone like Jungle Boy or Darby Allin, one of these guys who's super over, mega babyface, kind of thing like this. What would you think about that if AEW were to do that?
I think it would get a lot of heat, but I think heat nowadays isn't exactly the same as it used to be, because I see a lot of people get heat, and it's genuine, well-earned heat, but people will act like it's go-away heat. So yeah. I personally think that it would be really good. Like, that would be such a good story beat, because one of Kenny Omega's things right now is he's basically trying to be an American pro wrestling heel, and that comes with dusty finishes and interference spots from the Good Brothers.
Right.
But I'm already seeing people being like, I'm so tired of seeing the Good Brothers in Kenny's matches. I just wanted to have clean finishes and be the best.
Yeah. No, that's
character. And I think a dusty finish would work really well.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would go over super well.
That's definitely fair. I agree with you that just in general, especially if you look on social media, there seems to be kind of a conflation between heel heat and go away heat. It's like, if you have heat, it's because people don't like you. And you see it perfectly with, for example, Anthony Ogogo. Yes, I'm gonna mention him in the context of the world title picture. Take that for what you will. But specifically when it comes to him, you have all these people that are saying, well, because I like Anthony Ogogo, therefore he must be a babyface. And I think that conflation is a very modern construction when it comes to professional wrestling, because I think if you look at, for example, movies, my favorite movie series of all time is Star Wars, and Darth Vader is a beloved character, but he's a bad guy, right? I mean, no one is like cheering for Darth Vader, no one is rooting for Darth Vader to win in the Star Wars movies, but everyone loves Darth Vader. Good wrestling heels could potentially be the same thing. And we've seen that before. Like The Rock, for example. At first, no one was actually cheering for The Rock to win, but everyone loved The Rock. The problem with pro wrestling is that because it's instant, that feedback, it's so easy to, make that connection, that because I'm cheering, therefore I want this guy to win, therefore he must be a babyface. And I think, for example, in the case of Ogogo, and now in the case of Omega, that's not necessarily the same thing. I love Kenny Omega, but I'm still rooting for him to lose because he's a heel. But I think that kind of that disconnect has disappeared, and now people are just conflating the two. So I would agree with you. Something that in the old school would generate heat today you would definitely have some backlash to it. So I wonder if AEW, I mean, obviously they're not opposed to doing things like that. So I don't know, maybe they tried. It's just something that stood out to me because I'm like, man, like, could you imagine a crowd reacting to like thinking that Jungle Boy's won the title and then being told that no, he actually didn't, and we got to give the title back. I just because Jungle Boy's so over. I don't know if you could do it with someone who isn't as over as Jungle Boy, but like Hangman, Darby, those kinds of guys. I feel like it would really work for me. I don't know if it would work for everyone. Maybe that's some market research.
I'd love to see him roll the dice on it, honestly. Because I'm addicted to the discourse that comes out of every episode of AEW these days.
Mm-hmm.
But just as an example, look at what just happened with Nick Aldis. And now, of course, Nick Aldis isn't nearly as beloved as Kenny Omega right now.
Mm-hmm.
But just look at what happened when he retained via DQ at the last NWA pay-per-view.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't go over well with the fans, and not in a boo this man sort of way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was definitely more go-away heat for that. I guess, I mean, NWA also is even more sports-focused and old-school focused than AEW, which is kind of ironic because if you actually look at old-school matches, title matches ended in DQ all the time. I mean, it was not uncommon to have champions retained by DQ. So it's funny that NWA is like, oh, we're old school, we don't do that. Whereas the idea of not doing that is a very modern construction. Even going back to the 90s, like the Attitude Era, one of the most beloved times in wrestling, title matches ended in DQ or count out or whatever, no contest. I mean, it was all the time that happened. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's a risk for them to do it that way. But then that brings up the question, the loud people on social media, is that representative of the kind of people that you would find if you were to do something like that? Or, does AEW really trust that those people, would they be outraged no matter what you do? I think that's a legitimate question as well. Either way, I'd like to see it. This was a great match. Go watch it if you haven't seen it. It's well worth your time if you didn't see this. And congratulations, Jungle Boy. Also, just great week for him. I'm happy for him. Seems like a genuinely good guy. So I'm happy for him. Let's go now to the beginning, where all good things except for this podcast start. Opening match, I was positive was going to be Dante Martin versus Matt Sydal, but they swerved me a little bit. They went with Hangman versus Will Hobbs. And this ends up being, I think, another really solid match with two really solid workers. This was a back-to-basics powerhouse heel versus kind of brawler babyface kind of match. Again, if you look at the graph, Hangman gets beaten down early on, makes his comeback, and then Team Taz gets involved and brings him back down to earth, and then we get the finish. Solid stuff. I enjoyed it. Hangman's over. I really like Powerhouse Hobbs. I mean, I don't know what else you can say. This was a really, really solid opener. What did you think?
Hangman didn't expect this to be the opener because the opener...
He was saying he didn't expect this to be the opener, which I very much agree with. This is atypical. It's atypical of what AEW will usually deliver to you in an opening match. But again, the reason why I think it really works is because, first of all, these two guys really have a lot of chemistry, and that is not always something that you can count on when you get. Oh, there he is. He's back.
My headset, it switched to my headset and not my microphone for no reason. Don't know why.
All right.
Sorry
Love
about
Discord for that. No. You're all good. I was just saying, you were making the point about how this is an atypical AEW opening match.
No, here's the thing. I was saying the exact opposite of that. I'm really surprised you didn't expect this to be the opener, because the opener has been where Hangman's been hiding for the past few months. Mm-hmm. Just having banger matches in the opening of Dynamite. He had one with Wardlow. He had one with Max Caster of the Acclaimed. Mm-hmm. He's just been putting out his match with Brian Cage where he lost. That was also the opener. So I also don't know if you didn't catch the part where I said he's not he's incapable of having a bad match in the opener of Dynamite.
Well, that's definitely fair. I guess to go along with your point as well, he also opened Double or Nothing as well. So
yeah, I think this match was very, very good. He's been having basic matches, but he's been having the best basic matches.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well executed, certainly. And
also, he got busted open, and I don't know when.
I'm fairly certain it was on the Spirit of the Ring post, or when he got sent through the ropes, because it definitely looked like he went hard through that, and it definitely looked like he hit the top of his head on the ring post. So I think that's when it happened.
Yeah, he looked like Beth Phoenix in the 2020 Royal Rumble.
Yeah, true. Which it works for him. This Team Taz stuff, I find it interesting, but I'm hoping that what we get out of it is, let me put it this way. I'm hoping that all these guys end up going their separate ways, but I'm concerned because I like all these guys, and there's not enough room for them all to be successful all at the same time. So I almost feel like Team Taz, even though it has been, I don't want to say underwhelming as a faction, but it certainly has not been at the top of the card as a faction ever since Brian Cage challenged Jon Moxley and lost. They haven't been up at that level since then. So with Team Taz inevitably going down in the next probably month or two when AEW returns to touring, what do you want to see out of the breakup of this? Who is a potential star that you want to see made out of the breakup of Team Taz?
So I said this in the roundtable a couple of weeks ago, but I think having Brian Cage be the one to break off from Team Taz is a good idea in order to get Ricky Starks over, because having Ricky Starks break away, be the one to break away, would just throw another babyface into a pool of very, very good babyfaces. And I'm not saying that Ricky Starks wouldn't also be a great babyface. He absolutely would be. But you get a certain number of really good babyfaces, and you start to muddy the waters a bit. So the idea of having Brian Cage sort of enter that pool as not the most spectacular babyface, but as someone who can have a really good babyface matches, will actually help Ricky Starks in the long run, because he's going to be having great matches against Brian Cage, but Ricky Starks is going to be having all the charisma.
I would agree with you on that, definitely, because here's what I think about Brian Cage. There are some guys who, just by virtue of what they look like and how they wrestle, you do not need to build them up. And Brian Cage is one of those guys. Like, he can just step in, and without any build, without any introduction, he already is a threat, babyface or heel, right? He's already legitimate. So I think Ricky Starks is not one of those guys. He's great, but he needs to be built. We need to be introduced to Ricky Starks as a character in order for me to care about him, which we have been, and it's why I care about Ricky Starks now. So what I would like to see is Starks end up being kind of the big heel to come out of this. He's going to be their top heel guy. And what can happen is you can send Brian Cage away for a little bit so that, when you're ready to have him back, when you need someone like a Brian Cage to come back, if you need a babyface for a heel to beat, or if you have a heel champion and want a legitimate babyface challenger, there's a lot of things he can do as a face. And so he can be gone for a couple months and be fine. He can come back and just immediately be legitimate. So I think they should take advantage of that and use him to build Starks. And then by virtue of being near Starks, Hobbs and Hook will also be legitimized because of where Ricky Starks would sit in the card in this theoretical fantasy booking that we're doing. But I think it's also possible that we just see the whole Team Taz structure just dissolve and all these guys end up being singles guys, and we could see Taz then go on to manage Hook possibly. And unfortunately, Sergi's not here with us today, so we can't get the Hook gang perspective on where this might end up, but obviously there is a little bit of a fan base for Hook on Twitter and on Reddit. So, are you a Hook gang as well? Are you a Hook gang guy?
I did not know the Hook gang was a thing, but now that I know it is, I am seriously considering joining. What's the sign-up process like?
There's a guy on Twitter. I forgot the handle, but you can ask Sergi all about it. He's a Hook gang for life kind of guy. But I'm glad we have your perspective. So as a Hook fan, would you be okay with him it's just Hook and Taz and then trying to build Hook up that way?
Man, I forgot who it was a couple of weeks ago, but I think it was Seidel. There was a moment when Team Taz attacked a bunch of people from behind, and Hook just picked up Seidel dead weight and just threw him. I want more of that. I need more of that. I would love to see more of that.
It's so funny to me. His dad, I mean, Taz has been known his entire career. I mean, he's built like a refrigerator, and that's what he's been known for his entire career. And now you have his son who's like lean and wiry and looks nothing like his dad, but he has that same strength. He's got like you said, that moment with Seidel, and we've seen it before. So I'd like to see a kind of submission oriented Hook, but like people keep thinking that, because he looks like this and because his dad looks like Taz, they're like, oh, well, we can overpower him, and then you actually can't, because it turns out Hook is actually a lot stronger than he looks. And I think it would contrast really well with someone like Brian Cage, who's basically the reverse, because you see him and you're like, okay, well, this guy's he's just a powerhouse, but he probably can't move more than 3 feet without being gassed. And then suddenly he's like pulling out buckshot lariats and moonsaults and all this kind of crazy ass stuff that Brian Cage does. I think that contrasts really well.
Yeah, on the topic of a total split for Team Taz, if that's what's going to happen, I don't think I would like a total split of Team Taz. Have Ricky Starks go off, do his own thing, have Brian Cage go off, maybe they feud with each other. But having the two young guys in Powerhouse Hobbs and Hook maybe become a tag team, because that's sort of the capacity we've seen them in, not as an actual tag team in ring, but as the two people who come out and they're like, hey, we're going to cause some trouble while our main guy is wrestling in the ring. I think having them as a tag team managed by Taz would be a very good thing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And one last thing on the Ricky Starks and Brian Cage that I just thought of. It reminds me of the dynamic between The Rock and Ken Shamrock, honestly, where you have Ken Shamrock just having these great matches with The Rock and The Rock having these great promos. I feel like they could have a very similar dynamic.
Yeah.
That was my thought on I just thought of it. I thought it was clever.
All right, no, I'm with you. I think that's clever. I think the point is there are lots of things that could potentially be done with this whole storyline here with Team Taz, which, factions in a certain way in wrestling are made to dissolve at some point. But the question is, can you keep it interesting for long enough that we care about the faction, and then can you dissolve them at the right time? And is there a clear story? And for Team Taz, I think the first one is up for debate. I think the second one, they're certainly dissolving at the right time. So the third one now is, what clear story are they going to go with? And the fact that they have multiple options is definitely an advantage for them. And it makes it more interesting for us. But speaking of factions, one of the most interesting things for me that came from this show was the discussion around the Inner Circle and the Pinnacle feud. Now, what was so interesting, if you go over to ProWrestlingMusings.com and you read our roundtable on this, it definitely seemed like our writers were very, very high on this segment between Conan and Tully Blanchard. And they were so high on it that for a lot of them, it actually reheated the feud in a major way. On this podcast, we've heard a lot of criticism about the Pinnacle and the Inner Circle, about this feud and about how it was not really landing for them. This segment seemed to reignite a little bit of that heat for a lot of our writers on PWM. So I want to ask you now, as the official podcast version of what we thought of this segment, did this segment between Conan and Tully reignite any of this feud to you, and did this feud need to be reignited for you?
The feud absolutely needed to be reignited for me. It was on a downturn after Stadium Stampede, and you can go back and read our lovely back catalog of roundtables to get my full thoughts on this. But for weeks, I've been saying, if they're gonna continue this feud as a series of them breaking off and doing their own separate feuds, I would like it as one episode where it's just, this episode is Pinnacle versus Inner Circle, and we get it all out of the way at once. Mm-hmm. But this episode, and specifically this segment, really put it in perspective what they're doing here, because they have, the Inner Circle hasn't broken up. I think maybe they should have. I think that would have been a better way to continue these feuds, because you have each individual being like, you took my family away from me, and they can all go after them separately. Maybe that would be better. I'm not here to say. But this segment really felt like the Proud and Powerful have sort of broken off from the Inner Circle, at least a little bit. It felt like their own separate thing. It didn't feel like Inner Circle versus the Pinnacle. It felt like Proud and Powerful versus FTR. And that promo from Conan, oh my God. You saw a tear streaming out from under the guy's sunglasses, and you believed it. That was beautiful. Mm-hmm. Him talking about how Tully Blanchard is the mentor to FTR, but I'm the father of Proud and Powerful.
Yeah.
He hit so many, not just good notes, so many important notes to hit in this feud. It was perfect, honestly.
So my only issue with this was a great promo for sure. My only issue, though, is that line that you just mentioned, where Conan's saying, I'm the father of Proud and Powerful, you're just a mentor for FTR. So my question is, where the hell have you been, Conan? Like, if you're a father to Proud and Powerful, why is it that we are just now seeing your connection to them? I mean, bear in mind, his first involvement in AEW, if I remember correctly, was in the Hardy compound match that they did, the cinematic match that they did last year. And I mean, he just hasn't been really connected with FTR or with Proud and Powerful, rather. Now, if he wants to be, great, because he's a fantastic promo and he can lend a lot of experience and a lot of credibility, so that's totally fine. The problem is that Tully Blanchard has been around a lot more than Conan, and he's been around FTR a lot more than Conan has been around Proud and Powerful. So that line, on the one level, I'm like, yeah, fantastic. I mean, this is exactly what you want. But on another, I'm kind of saying, well, shouldn't you have been around more for me to actually believe what you're saying? You know, so that was sort of a disconnect for me. But I think I don't want this to be taken as I didn't like this promo. I love this promo. But I do think that there were a couple things that just stuck out to me that took away a little bit from my enjoyment of it. I think the old school way of cutting promos is still, it's evident with these guys. They're much better than, some older school guys that we see these days, but you can still see that kind of, influence when it comes to, they talk very fast and they try to get out as many things as they can. And so sometimes they'll kind of stumble over their words, but it's okay because they're going to have like 5 more analogies or something like that. It's just kind of an old school thing. It's totally up to preference. If you like that, then fantastic. I am not an old school fan. I didn't start watching wrestling until very recently. So, it's varying levels of returns depending on what kind of fan you are. Overall, I didn't dislike this feud as much as most people were coming into this. Often on this podcast, I was the one saying, I actually really enjoyed this feud and I'm liking where it's going. And a big reason why was because I assumed from the beginning that all of this individual stuff was going to work for me. And I assumed that when they broke out into these individual feuds, it was going to be entertaining. And so far it has been. Not just Proud and Powerful and FTR, but also Sammy Guevara and MJF now, sort of MJF and Sean Spears both, has been also very entertaining. And Sammy Guevara also cut a great promo when it comes to this whole angle. And that's a big reason why I was okay with the feud moving the way it did. I assumed that I was going to be entertained. I am. And so now I'm even more entertained. And I think, to your point, the fact that Proud and Powerful and FTR seem to be doing their own thing now, almost independent of what the rest of Inner Circle and Pinnacle are doing, I think that's also what really works. I think AEW has understood that the rest of the groups are going to hold these guys back if they have to be involved in the story. So let's just put them against each other, tag versus tag, and get rid of all the other stuff. And now you add Tully and Conan in for that little extra bit of heat. And obviously the mind breaker onto Conan was nuts. I mean, I popped when it was FTR under the mask, and I really popped when they hit the mind breaker on Conan.
I completely forgot about that because I was thinking about how good the promo was. But oh my god, yeah, I was so shocked when they hit that. I think it's called the Big Rig now.
I thought that's what they were calling whatever the Shatter Machine is.
Is that what they're calling Shatter Machine? Oh,
yeah, I think
that makes more sense. So yeah, they hit the Mindbreaker on, and I gasped because I was like, Conan shouldn't be doing that.
I said the same thing. I mean, obviously he felt safe doing that, so that made me feel better. I'm like, he obviously wouldn't have done that if he didn't feel safe. And I mean, if anyone, like, I would feel safe taking a Mindbreaker from FTR, just given the talent of those guys. So that made me feel a little better. But God, in the moment, I'm like, oh my God, he's dead.
Absolutely.
What a great way to get heat, man. These FTR really does. We were talking about Kenny Omega, obviously, earlier, someone who really understands pro wrestling. FTR really get how to draw heat. I mean, talk about guys that understand pro wrestling. FTR understand pro wrestling.
FTR understand tag pro wrestling like no one else. Maybe even better on a technical level than the Young Bucks. The Young Bucks are very good at doing like character work for themselves and working in their opponents into their own characters. But FTR just knows how to lay out a match. They know how to be complete bad guys. They have a different level of understanding for it.
Yeah, they really do. I mean, I would even go back to, I think the level of understanding for the technical aspects of tag wrestling in the ring, as well as how to tell stories with their characters. What FTR is showing right now is on the level of, I mean, I almost don't even want to go here, but I'm going to go here anyway. If you talk about the great tag teams of all time, if you're talking about Arn and Tully, if you're talking about Midnight, if you're talking about the Rock and Roll, like people like that, these guys, to me, if they can continue this level for an extended period of time, they will be on that level historically. Just because what they're doing right now is so good, and it's so basic but so effective that, to me, they deserve to be on that level if they're going to sustain this. And I hope that eventually they will be tag team champions again, and we can see in front of a full crowd how people would react to FTR being champions. And I'm sure that that's in the cards for AEW moving forward.
How extended do you need it to be? They've been doing this since 2015, 2014 in NXT. They've been putting on these levels of matches. That's, 6 years now? All of their matches with DIY and American Alpha. I think I'm comfortable in calling them one of the best tag teams ever.
That's definitely fair. I guess the 2 years or a little under 2 years on the WWE main roster is kind of like, it's made me forget all the other stuff looking back from NXT. So that's definitely fair.
I forgot it existed. I'm going to be completely honest. Like,
okay,
literally when I was just saying that sentence, my mind was like, okay, all the stuff in NXT, all the stuff in AEW. Nothing in between. No Usi hot cream to be found.
Like, what were they doing in 2018 and 19? Like, that's what they are. All right, that's definitely fair. Either way, certainly I think they are not done with the tag title picture. And the fact that we've talked before about, this upcoming show in New York maybe being a chance for Proud and Powerful to get that, hometown kind of win, and the fact that they keep mentioning that they're from New York, It feels like, hey, that's a few months. We can build them up. They're real baby faces. The Bucks are heels. It would make a lot of sense. And then FTR is just right there to potentially go after the belts later on. There's a lot that can happen right now in this tag division, which is, I think, just a great compliment to AEW and how well they've handled tag team wrestling since they began as a company. Speaking of the Bucks, I just want to briefly mention they had a promo here. I thought this was fantastic, the Bucks promo. The fact that they had Brandon Cutler, they kept telling him to shut up, and then at the end he made this analogy, and Nick was like, "That's actually pretty good. I'm going to take that." And also the EVP, the Extremely Violent People line. This was a great promo. This is the Bucks at their best, I think. Again, just drawing heat and in a way that I really like the Young Bucks. I love seeing them on my screen, but I desperately want them to lose the title because they're such assholes. I mean, this is great promo work for me. What did you think about the Bucks' involvement in this show?
The Bucks just being total asses. It's my favorite thing. Just them, they're treating Brandon like complete crap, but like he's kind of on board with it. He wants to impress them. He's taken this idea of being their young boy and ran with it.
Yep.
It's like, because I thought it was going to be like, oh, the sad poor Brandon Cutler sort of thing going into it. Mm-hmm. But no, they just transformed it into this like comedy routine that I'm here for.
Yep.
They're, as heels right now, they are coming close to as good a heel as MJF is.
Mm-hmm.
They've taken all of their heat from the internet and the people who do not like him and turned it into legitimate heat. No, going back to what we said earlier about go away heat versus regular real heat, they've taken their quote unquote go away heat from the fans who criticized them a lot, and they've turned that into legitimate heat within the context of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And that's genius.
Oh yeah. And we talked before about the Bucks, how they've also changed physically in the ring. They've changed their style when it comes to wrestling. That just, I mean, the theme of today's show is clearly people who understand pro wrestling. And the Young Bucks, again, are a team that really understands pro wrestling. I think this is such a slap in the face to people who, talked so much about the Bucks and how they're just spot monkeys and they don't get it and they're not good characters and all this. The Bucks are basically saying, you know what, you can take that and shove it, because look at the character work that is going on here for the Bucks, and they have really proven how great they are and how well they understand pro wrestling. Again, there's that theme that's going to keep coming up.
It's the theme of AEW, really.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Let's talk about Matt Sydal versus Dante Martin. This match, there were some people that were saying, what's the point of having this match? There's really no point for this match to be on TV. While I do understand that, I would just say that, you know what? If you're going to put on a match of this quality, I don't care if there's a point to it. Sometimes you can't do this all the time. But for like one match a show, if you're just going to give me great in-ring quality and call it at that, fine. I'm not going to complain. And this certainly was that level of quality for me. These guys are fantastic. Dante Martin and Darius, top flight. Hopefully when Darius comes back, will be in the conversation for tag team champions. I hope they will be. I think these two are great. I think certainly from an in-ring perspective, they are about as good as it gets for me, just in terms of the excitement level of their matches, and Dante showed it against Matt Sydal here. I really enjoyed this match from a statistical perspective. This was an even contest. The fact, by the way, when you look at the submission time, they put over immediately that Matt Sydal has been going into the submission game, and that's what he's been working on. And the fact that Dante, with 35 seconds of submission time, was able to keep up with Matt Sydal, I think, again, just puts over Dante Martin and what he's been able to do, how he can be adaptive during a match. 32 reversals in less than 10 minutes. That is just a back and forth match at its best. I really liked this. Sometimes, for me, I'm a simple man. You don't have to give me anything more than an entertaining wrestling match. What did you think about this one?
If people have been asking why this match exists, it exists for one very clear reason. We're getting Matt Sydal versus Andrade El Idolo, and it's going to be amazing. Andrade and Vicky came out for some reason in the middle of introductions. I don't quite get, but having Matt Sydal come out and interrupt them like, hey, this is my match, what are you doing? And going to the ring past them, that's going to set up just a great first match for Andrade. And the match that Sydal had with Dante was just proof of that.
Mm-hmm.
How far Matt Sydal has come in AEW since being the guy who tripped in his debut, it's so amazing. He was at a certain level coming in, and he was very good coming in, but he's gotten so much better on the roster having matches with the people he's been having matches. His match with Kenny Omega being one of my favorite matches on Dynamite, really. Like, it wasn't even that big of a deal, but it's such a great match. And some of the stuff he did in that match was so unique and so fun. And just him putting on this 10-minute clinic with Dante Martin. They worked in a sunset flip at sunset. Let's not forget that.
A sunset flip that was so good. It not only happened during the sunset, but Dante Martin jumped so high that you could see the sunset between him and Matt Sydal.
This match was it was fast paced. It was fun. It shows you that the eventual Andrade match is going to be just so good. It got me hyped for that match, and it did its job.
So let me ask you this. The involvement of Andrade and Vicky beforehand, I wasn't quite sure what to make of that, and this match, the quality of it made me forget that even happened, which is why I didn't mention it until now, because I actually forgot that happened. So when you look at that, it did feel a little bit random in context, but if it is a way to set up Andrade's first match in AEW, what do you think, looking back, does that make it okay to do something that is kind of a non sequitur like that interruption before this contest?
I'm on the fence about it, and just so everyone knows, my background is in creative writing, so stuff like this is sort of what I look at, and I don't necessarily think it justifies it. I don't think the partnership between Vicky and Andrade has quite clicked for me yet. I much preferred his character in the one-on-one with JR, and I kind of want to see his character on his own, and having Vicky come out screaming, which I love Vicky. If you've read my roundtable contributions, I put over Vicky as much as I can, even though every time I've written about her, I kind of needed to say something not so great about her. But I love Vicky, and I love her excuse me gimmick. I don't think it works for Andrade just because his gimmick is tranquilo.
Yeah.
And Vicky very much so isn't.
I'm expecting the swerve, and at this point, I mean, people have just put this into my head, and now I cannot get it out of my head that Tia Trinidad is coming to AEW. She's going to manage Andrade again, and I'm not letting myself believe it, because it would be just, it's one of those things that shouldn't happen. Like, it's too perfect that it shouldn't actually happen. You know, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So that's what I think about this. Vicky, I'm much with you. I think her character doesn't necessarily work for Andrade, but the one thing that really stands out to me every time that she's on at this point is that even all these years later, she is still so good at getting heat, and the fans just react to her in such a visceral way. And so I do feel like in the short term, if you want to put Andrade over as a heel that the fans should absolutely be booing, this is how you do it. You pair him with someone who everyone is going to boo when she gets out there. Now, is this a long-term partnership for Andrade? Probably not, and I hope it's not. I think as he comes into his own in AEW a little bit more, he should drop Vicky. But in the short term, if you want to just make that basic link in everyone's mind, Andrade equals boo him because Vicky, you're gonna boo Vicky. I'm okay with that, definitely in the short term. And again, the excuse me gimmick, I mean, it just gets heat, and it's the best kind of heat as well. So, I mean, if this is going to set up Andrade versus Sydal, sign me up. I'll take that match.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I don't know if I actually ended up answering your question. I don't necessarily think the fact that we're getting this match justified that small sliver, but it was such a small sliver of content that I think that in itself sort of erases the writing faux pas that it caused.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. If you're going to make me watch it for 15 minutes, we're going to have a problem. But if it's 30 seconds at the beginning of this match, fine. You know, I can deal with 30 seconds that don't really click. So, let's talk about Chris Statlander versus Ali. Statlander is someone who I really like. I think that as a babyface, she has a lot of potential when it comes to the title scene, and I think that AEW is understanding that, because when she first debuted, she was doing the whole alien gimmick and all that, and she's still kind of doing that, obviously, but it's much subtler now. It's much less pronounced than it used to be, and I think that's AEW saying that we want you to be on a world championship level at some point, and so in order to do that, you're not going to be able to have the alien gimmick. We're going to have to pare that down a little bit. Much like Orange Cassidy, they kind of pared down the laziness gimmick a little bit when it came to trying to put Orange Cassidy onto a world championship level. And so I think it's worked for Statlander. This match, again, from a statistical perspective, Ali is a great striker. It's kind of interesting here because Chris Statlander, before she got hurt, was a really prolific striker, one of the best in AEW if you look at ProWrestlingMusings.com, if you look at our database. But in this match, it was all grapples from her. I mean, she got out. Ali outstruck her all match, but Statlander used 10 grapples to Ali's 2. That was the difference in this match. Statlander with 10 reversals to Ali's 6. Again, this is good babyface stuff, but it's not built from a striking perspective. It's built from a grappling perspective, which is something different for Statlander and something that I really liked. So it ends up being that this match was a lot of fun. I liked the finish. I liked the fact that it was a clean finish, but it was also, it had some kind of shenanigans to set up Orange Cassidy and everyone else, but ultimately Statlander was just the better wrestler coming out of this. So this was a match that I ended up, really enjoying. What did you think about this?
I think it was a fun match. There's one part, and I feel kind of bad, but there's one part that sort of stood out that took me out of it a little bit, and I hate saying that because I don't like hearing other people be like, this one thing in a match really took me out of it. But there's just this moment that I want to harp on a bit where Chris Statlander, Penelope set up, or not Penelope, Ali set up Nando's kick, the corner super kick where your head's trapped, and Chris Statlander tried to do a handstand out of it, and then she got super kicked anyway. That part took me out of it a little bit, and this was a short enough match that little bit it took me out of it sort of took me out of the whole thing. The match was very fun. I don't think it was up to the standard of some of the women's matches they've been having recently. That being said, I think Chris Statlander, when she challenges for the title, she will be more than ready to have that spot as a challenger. I think they've been building her up very well.
Yeah, I agree. And that spot as well, I noticed that. It didn't take me out of it so much, but it was just a momentary thing where I was like, why would you do that? Like, she was aiming the super kick anyway, so why would you not move your head? But, whatever. I mean, for me, if anything, it just shows Statlander is very strong and very flexible, and that's kind of I think what they're trying to reinvest us in Chris Statlander's character and her as a wrestler. So, whatever. It was kind of dumb, but I definitely see where you're coming from with that. The women's stuff as a whole on this show it was kind of interesting because they have a fun match between Statlander and Ali that I did like. They have a Jade Cargill promo, and I'm just wondering where the hell this is going. Like, it's the same thing every week, and I'm like, is there something here? Is she going to do something? Is she hurt, and they're just waiting for her to get cleared? Like, I'm not quite clear on what's going on with that. And then, Britt Baker cuts a promo, and look, I'm never going to say no to a Britt Baker promo. I think she's excellent. I think she's the best promo in the women's division, and I'm not sure it's particularly close. And so the more Britt Baker promos, the better. And again, we're angling towards this tag match next week, which I'm absolutely positive is not going to happen. So,
oh God, I hope it doesn't happen.
I'm positive it's not going to happen. So I'm just wondering what happens in its place, and it's keeping me intrigued because I'm just wondering. Again, I'm working under this assumption that it's not just going to be a straight tag match involving Vicky Guerrero. Like something's going to go down. So I'm just wondering what exactly that is. But it does feel like, I wouldn't say so much a running in place week for the women's division, but it does feel like they definitely understood the main selling point of this show was Kenny Omega versus Jungle Boy, and they were just kind of letting it go. So as far as the storytelling in the women's division goes on this episode of Dynamite, the best word I could describe it as is solid and inoffensive. What about you?
I think we've had a few running in place weeks, just being on Friday and Saturday. So I don't think I think you're right. It's not super offensive that we haven't really gotten much update in the women's division. I know we've gotten something of a feud between Nyla Rose and Britt Baker. I don't think it's been particularly great. But again, we're leading towards that tag match. Hopefully something that isn't the advertised match happens, or else it's going to not go over great with the fans. As far as the Jade Cargill and Smart Mark Sterling stuff, I really like that.
Okay.
I think what they're doing, and this is just my theory, is that they know she's working in the ring. They know she had that. So I think they're trying to get her mic reps. They're trying to get her promo reps in on TV. And I appreciate that, especially with Smart Mark Sterling, who is a fun character, who has one of the highest watched segments in AEW against Jon Moxley in that main event, which I find is a hilarious stat. And yeah, the Chris Statlander, I thought they were actually going to build her up to be the first opponent for Britt Baker. I can see why they're holding off, because that's going to be a much bigger match.
Yeah.
At some point, maybe even on a pay-per-view. It's super. Not much happened, but not much, like nothing bad happened.
Yeah. Which, I mean, given the inconsistent booking, specifically of the women's division in AEW, kind of feels like, if they're not taking a step back, then that's like you have to build consistency before you start making big leaps forward, and feels like that's what AEW is doing. They're using Britt as the consistent rock. It already feels like she is going to be a consistent champion. Not that Sheeta wasn't, but the fact that Sheeta wasn't on TV that much. She didn't cut promos. It was just kind of matches with her. Britt Baker feels like a consistent character that they can put on TV every week and she'll be entertaining. And so it feels like they're building up with her. So as I have said before on this podcast, I'm in this for the long game. AEW relies on stars to build up their divisions. They've done it in both the men's singles and the men's tag division. So it's harder for them to do it when they don't have established stars the way they did in those two areas. So that's kind of what I'm waiting for. And it's a bit of a grind. It's a long process, but we've reached the point where nothing they do is bad, in my opinion. Now, if they do this tag match with Vicky Guerrero and she actually gets in there and wrestles, that might be bad. So we'll have to deal with that when the time does come. But there's a little time before that, so we can figure that out. And I'm positive that it's not going to go down like that. That's the one thing I'm sure about, is that it's not going to happen like that. So, speaking of, by the way, the men's singles division, I would be remiss if I didn't get your thoughts on Miro. This is someone that we often talk about. We've talked about a long time on the podcast, and I have yet to talk to anyone who isn't a gigantic fan of Miro and doesn't want him to win perpetually and win forever and be the TNT champion for life or something. Not saying that I'm that guy. I'm just saying we haven't found anyone yet. So are you going to break the chain? Is there anything wrong with Miro for you, or are you full on Miro bandwagon here?
Oh, I'm absolutely on the Miro bandwagon. Are you crazy? Anyone who's not on the Miro bandwagon is a liar and a thief. He's just taken himself and he's just made him into a Bond villain. It is. We all saw the promo where he conjured a light thunder rumble. I believe that was his power. I believe that was his.
That wasn't editing. That just happened.
No, that was his connection to God. I've been saying this a lot on Twitter, and I've been posting this video in reference to Miro. Have you seen? Are you a Key and Peele fan?
I have seen a lot of their stuff. Yeah.
Have you seen the MMA trash talking skit?
Yes.
Yeah, where it's just the guy get the religious MMA character getting more and more cryptic and incoherent as he goes along.
Yeah.
That's what Miro's character is, and it's terrifying. Every week when he thanks God for his flexible wife, I love him even more. The guy is a star, and everyone knew that a long time ago, and I'm glad that he's getting a chance to be that now.
Yeah, I agree. It's really this feels like a character of his own design. It really feels like he went in and said, "This is the kind of character I want to be in AEW," and it feels like AEW. They've been planting this seed for a long time because he's always been terrifying, and from the very beginning of his time when Kip Sabian introduced him, Kip was kind of like he was kind of watching his step around Miro because he knew what he was capable of, and now we're actually seeing the full realization of Miro's character. So the only thing I can say is I just want him to have a longer term feud. I mean, he's able to build these feuds over a couple weeks with this challenger. He did it with Brian Pillman. I want to see him have a longer term feud that he can really sink his teeth into, and we can get maybe some stip matches or something like that we can really see what Miro is capable of working as a character. But right now, these promos for me, I mean, he is knocking these out of the park. I mean, these are excellent.
Yeah, going back to the Kip Sabian thing, just his I think a lot of people think that his first storyline in AEW was very incoherent and, dare I say, bad. And I might agree with that if he wasn't what he is now, because it is very clear that what he is now was specifically born from him coming in as sort of like the laid-back video game guy who's friends with Kip Sabian. I'm the stag do best man. And he took that bit of his character that he introduced and molded it into this twisted power villain who's like, who I was when I came in was an embarrassment. And that was very, very intentional.
It almost feels like his character at the beginning was he wanted to be that guy at first, like he wanted to be chill and he wanted to, not worry about winning championships and all this kind of stuff. But then he realized as he went on that that actually is all he cares about. He doesn't care about video games. He doesn't care about arcade machines. He doesn't care about his friends. Like, all he wants to do is win championships, and apparently have sex with his flexible wife.
Of course.
That's also important. Exactly. But you know what? That character progression, again, we talked a little earlier about, whether or not you can sort of make up for a story with what happens after. And I think in this particular instance, while I'm not the biggest fan of the whole Kip Sabian Miro best man thing, I do think that his character now sort of justifies why he was that way at the time. So that's fair enough. And even then, I mean, he was sadistic with Charles the Butler. You kind of see that like if that had gone on for much longer, then you can see where it might have gone. I think AEW did pull the plug at the right time and just hot-shotted the championship onto him, and it works because, again, we talk about Brian Cage, those guys that are just legitimate when you see them. Miro is one of those guys. And credit to him, by the way. I mean, he's earned that. The amount of work that he's done on his body to look like that. He has earned the ability to call himself legitimate just by virtue of how he looks. So good for him. I mean, tons of credit for him for being able to do this.
And what you said about a longer term feud, I think he actually does have some, and it depends on what you consider a long term feud. If you consider a feud that sort of starts and then you have a long break and then they get back to it. I think once they revisit him versus Orange Cassidy in a one-on-one sort of way, because we never got that one-on-one match in the tag team feud. It was only ever tag team matches between them. I think whenever they decide to revisit that, I think Orange Cassidy is actually a very strong contender, and even if he doesn't win, they're going to put on matches that he very well could win.
Yep.
And also Kip Sabian. Whenever he is cleared to return, we're going to get that feud for at least a few weeks, and you can consider that a long-term feud because they built it and then he had to go off for injury, and now he's back, and we've all been anticipating that feud. Right. So as far as long-term feuds, he has a few lined up, but also I'm really excited for him versus Brian Pillman Jr., and I'm really happy that that's going to be happening.
Yeah, I agree with you. And seeing Brian Pillman in this sort of context, as a singles guy and being painted as just a pure white meat babyface, that is definitely an exciting prospect because we could be seeing a potential glimpse into his future if he wanted to go into the singles division, or if if he wanted to stay as a tag team with the Varsity Blondes will be basically the same characters, at least for the foreseeable future. So getting to see him in a prominent role like this, really just as a character, is really exciting. I know he can wrestle at this level, so his character work at this level has been what really excites me, and his promo I thought was great. It's just typical babyface stuff, and it's good. It's reliant on who you're facing, but in this particular case, he's facing a badass heel who looks like a monster and absolutely unbeatable, in which case a generic babyface promo like this really works. So far be it from me to criticize that. He's still young. Isn't he like 22 or something?
I don't know his age, but I'm pretty sure he's still pretty young. I just want to give a quick shout out to Brian Pillman Jr.'s hair. I really appreciate a guy rocking a mullet in the current age. He makes it work.
I'm with you on that. I totally agree. He absolutely does. The last match that I want to talk about here is Bear Bronson versus Ethan Page. This, to me, existed for one reason and one reason only, and that was to put over Ethan Page as a monster, even though he doesn't look like one. And again, this goes back to certain guys are just legitimate from the off because of how they look. Ethan Page is not one of those guys. He looks like a pro wrestler, but does he look like a powerhouse? No. You have to build him as a powerhouse. And in this case, they certainly did. Statistically, it didn't look like that at first. It's kind of interesting. What you would expect from building a powerhouse from the off is to have him, first of all, dominate a match, have most of the match offense, have a lot more strikedowns than his opponent, first of all. And that's not exactly what Ethan Page did here. But I think what AEW did was they kind of towed the line between building a powerhouse and also building a very compelling heel. And so the fact that Page has 7 fouls in a 10-minute match, he's got 7 fouls, 9 taunts. That's exactly what you want to see from a heel like this. So his strikedowns, only 2 recorded strikedowns, but I mean Bear Bronson is like gigantic, so it kind of makes sense. And then obviously the ending of the match, actually hitting the ego's edge on a man this big, to do that, like, I mean, that put it over to me. I don't care how many strikedowns he had. If you can lift up a guy of that size and do that, I mean, like Lance Archer can do that, but Lance Archer's like 6'9" and huge, and Ethan Page is not. So the fact that he can do it, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll take that. And then obviously promo afterwards, we're going to get a coffin match between Page and Darby Allin. I think, who was it? Was it Simon Miller that might have said this? I can't remember who it was. But it was Sidgwick on Twitter, who said this is going to be less like Undertaker threatening to roll Viscera into a coffin and more Darby Allin being threatened, or Ethan Page threatening to throw Darby Allin off of increasingly huge heights into a coffin. So this angle works for me. I'll take it. This match also worked for me. It was good. Ethan Page is a good heel. Scorpio Sky's a great heel. They're both good promos, and I mean, what more can you say? It was solid. Again, it was anything that happened before the main event was kind of like, if it was good, I'll take it, and this certainly was that.
Yeah, the match itself was sort of the worst of the best this week. It was still a good match. I would take that match any day of the week. If I had one wrestling match to pick from this show, probably wouldn't be that one. But if I had to watch that match again, I wouldn't complain.
Yep.
I was terrified of that Ego's Edge at the very end. I was horrified. I was like, I think he can do it. He wouldn't be trying if he couldn't. But so many things can go wrong when you're not just power bombing the guy. You're throwing the guy over your head and neck.
Right.
I was terrified, but he hit it. It looked beautiful. I've often said about Ethan Page's character, and I've seen a lot of people criticize, like, I don't really get why he's called all ego. Like, he is sort of egotistical, but he's more insane than he is egotistical. And I've always liked the idea that when he says all ego, he actually means all egomaniacal rage. Because the guy, every time he speaks, like, he has two kinds of promos. He has his promo when he's backstage with Scorpio Sky. By the way, Men of the Year, I love it. I don't get why people are like, this isn't clicking with me. Men of the Year are great.
I agree. Who says that? What's not clicking? These guys are awesome.
Twitter is weird.
And that is very weird.
Ethan Page has his promos with Scorpio Sky where he's being an ass. But he also had the promos when he's talking directly to Darby Allin and he's just screaming. And it's like, why are you screaming? He's screaming because he's insane. The man is a madman, and I love it. He is going to try to throw Darby at any distance into a coffin.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very excited for that match. The match that they're going to put together, Darby has proven himself to be able to put on the most believable match out of anyone in the modern era. Like, just from a pure believability standpoint, I've never invested in a match more than a Darby Allin match. And that's every match he's done in AEW. The Miro match, all of his matches with Sky and Page. So this coffin match, like, it's a bit of a joke gimmick at this point because of Undertaker's style of, got to get this big man into this coffin.
Right.
I'm going to do it in slow motion. But I believe in Darby and Ethan's ability to make this an emotional, insane, probably the best coffin match ever.
It may very well be. I mean, it is so obviously synonymous with The Undertaker, just in terms of the gimmick and what it's about. And I think pretty much every coffin/casket match of all time has had The Undertaker in it. So obviously it's synonymous with him. But this is going to be a very different style because you're dealing with two guys who are incredibly athletic. Someone in Darby Allin who just sells his ass off. Maybe the best seller in the world right now, just in terms of how, like you said, like how believable it is when Darby Allin is getting his ass beat. You're like, did wrestling stop being real at some point during this match? Like, are they actually legitimately beating Darby Allin's ass? Like, that's what it looks like. And so to do this, AEW is so good when they take steps like this, that they just put a twist on it, that they do the match just in a different way that is so effective. I'm thinking of Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston in the I Quit match and how great that match was. Cody versus Wardlow in the cage and how great that match ended up being. The Blood and Guts match, which up until the finish was a phenomenal match. So AEW has a history of taking a stip that has a long history in and of itself and being able to put their own twist on it that really works. And it so often revolves around the kind of characters that you have involved in the match itself. And in this particular case, the characters, Ethan Page and Darby Allin, the way that they have interacted, the way that this story has gone, this has all the hallmarks of taking a classic stipulation, putting a spin on it, and making it really effective, and putting it in front of a full crowd at Road Rager. This, to me, I mean, I don't see any possible way that I will not love this match. And I know I don't always like to go into matches feeling that, because you set yourself up for disappointment, but so often AEW, they promise low and they deliver high, and in this particular case, they're promising high. They're giving us a casket match, so the expectations that they will deliver, and there's no reason for me to believe that they won't deliver at that level.
Yeah, absolutely. That match at Road Rager itself is going to be off the hook, off the chain, something cool.
We're gonna go with off the chain. We'll go with off the chain. But yeah, I absolutely.
It's gonna be absolutely off the chain.
I'm with you on that one, and the fact that they're setting up Road Rager the way they are, knowing that they then have 2 nights of Fyter Fest, and is it Fight for the Fallen that happens after that? They have 4 named shows all in a row. So the fact that Road Rager looks like this, and you still have all of these other things going on, they could legitimately put like 1 or 2 big matches per show in that 4-week period, and each show will end up being fantastic in its own right. And so if this is the marquee match of Road Rager, if this is the main event, I'm sure it will be. You know what? I will take this. I will love Road Rager, and I am even more excited for the 3 future shows after that, knowing that I think AEW is going to pace themselves, and they know how big these events are going to be. Full crowds back on Wednesday. They're all named. This is going to be AEW possibly the most eyes that they've ever had on the product, at least since 2019. So, you know, I think AEW knows the position they're in, and they are prepared to deliver. And given what we've seen the last 2 or 3 years from AEW, I'm confident that they will deliver.
Absolutely.
So that does it for the for Dynamite, but because this is a Saturday Dynamite and they're returning to Wednesday, I want to do a little bit of a preview, and thankfully Craig and the whole Pro Wrestling Musings team has put together for us a preview of our main event on AEW's return to Wednesdays, which is, of course, Sammy Guevara versus MJF. That will be both men's first singles match in 2021, which is crazy to think about because they're both really over, but they haven't fought singles in the last 6 months. So that, I mean, just shows you how great I think both have been as characters. But that is going to be the marquee main event for AEW's return to Wednesdays. I am really excited for this. The angle that they shot on this last episode of Dynamite makes me even more excited for it. And matchup-wise, I think these guys, they match up so well. Sammy Guevara is a great seller. MJF is just a phenomenal heel. This guy averages 41 fouls an hour, which is just, that's unthinkable. I mean, you're talking about a foul every minute and 20 seconds, which is crazy. I mean, almost no one in the world could pull off a foul rate like that, but MJF really does because of his character. He averages over 1 taunt every 2 minutes, which again is just nuts. What do you think about it? I am really excited for this match. I think this is just a great, this will be a great showcase for both men and a really exciting return to Wednesday for me. So when you look at this, Sammy Guevara versus MJF, what do you think about this? Are you excited for this main event match coming up on Wednesday?
This match is going to be so fun. It's just, in my head, there is a class of these cruiser, maybe they're not cruiser, these smaller guys, these smaller, younger guys. And very early on in Dynamite, they were just sort of pairing them off. You got MJF versus Jungle Boy. You got Sammy Guevara versus Darby Allin in these really sprint pay-per-view openers. And I think this match, they basically set up the idea of having these guys face off on with each other. So this match is one of those matches in that series of these are the next 4 or 5 guys, and here is a match between them. and here's what they can do. And I expect big things from it, just like I expected big things from those other matches I mentioned.
That's such a great perspective, because it really does feel like this is AEW. They're introducing to us all of these people that are going to be major players in the coming years, and these are certainly two of them in Guevara and MJF. But the fact that Jungle Boy is already there, and they've given us a world title match to prove to us that yes, Jungle Boy is going to be on this level, so he's already there. Hangman, AEW just assumes correctly that everyone believes that Hangman is already on a world championship level, and certainly is setting up to challenge Kenny Omega at some point, may very well take the belt from Kenny Omega. So he's already there. And these are all guys under the age of 30. These are all guys under the age of 27. I think Hangman is the oldest of everyone I've just mentioned, and he's 26. So, I mean, that's that is unreal to think about. Also, the fact that Darby Allin is there as well. He's already been TNT champion, so he's in that mix, certainly. I mean, we talked about Brian Pillman. He's getting a TNT championship match. Top Flight are both under the age of 20. Like, it's just, or 21, I think. I mean, there's so much young talent for AEW, and this absolutely does feel like they're taking two of them who are both over, both potential. I mean, they're already main event. They've had an entire Dynamite event built around their feud as it pertains to Pinnacle and Inner Circle. So these are already guys who are going to be in that position going forward. So this is AEW's real acknowledgement of the fact that not only we don't just need to put these guys against the veterans, we can put these guys against each other and they can have great matches. And to me, there's no doubt that they will have a great match. The question is, how much involvement will there be from the Pinnacle and Inner Circle? So then I'll pose this question to you. How much involvement would you like to see? What is ideal when it comes to the greater Pinnacle Inner Circle feud in this match? What is ideal? What would you like to see?
I think as far as interference comes, I think we're going to get interference from Shawn Spears and Wardlow on MJF's side. I think that's inevitable. You have Sammy Guevara's feud with Shawn Spears, which I've written in depth on at the Roundtable. Please go read the Roundtable for Double or Nothing. It's hilarious.
I concur. It is awesome.
You have that feud still in the mix. You had it on this past show at the very beginning that we didn't mention. But you had Shawn Spears hitting Sammy with a chair. So he's definitely going to interfere on behalf of MJF. Wardlow's going to interfere on behalf of MJF. I think, and don't quote me on this, I have no sources. I think I read somewhere that Chris Jericho might be taking some time off for his injured arm. So I don't know if we're going to get Chris Jericho to interfere. I don't want to see anyone interfere on Sammy's behalf. But if we are going to get someone, it's probably going to be Jake Hager. I think Proud and Powerful are preoccupied. I think somewhere in my head, I got it in my mind that Chris Jericho is going to be taking time off. So I don't think he's going to show up, but he definitely might. I could be completely wrong. So yeah, I think Sammy might be going in this one alone, honestly.
I would definitely be okay seeing that. I actually think that a really good blueprint for how to do matches like this where there is a greater involvement is actually what we saw in the World Championship match this past Dynamite between Omega and Jungle Boy, where Omega's boys tried to get involved and they get stopped while trying to get in there. And I think that's a really, really good way to do it, because you can further the angle, but you don't have to tarnish the match. And that's exactly what we saw in the World Championship match. And so I would like to see that here. I don't want them to overdo it. And it would make sense from MJF that, I mean, he always gets things involved, whether it's the ring or the bat when he was with the Inner Circle or whatever. He always gets things involved. So I would be okay with that because he is that kind of heel. But I don't want to see it too much. I don't want to see it completely break down. I don't want to see a complete schmoz. I think just one ring shot or, something. One is all you need, in my opinion. I would like to see MJF, rather. I would like to see MJF win this. I'd like to see him do it. I mean, not clean because he's a heel, but I'd like to see him do it in a typical heel fashion. And if we are going to write Jericho out, if that is going to be the plan, and again, I'm going based off speculation, certainly not saying that
I have
is
zero sources.
Yeah, so certainly not saying that is the definitive plan, but if that is going to be the plan, the way that I'd like to see it done is MJF wins, takes Chris Jericho, puts the salt of the earth on the arm, and I don't know, they do something nuts, like hit him with a chair while he's in, or whatever.
Salt of the earth through a chair.
Yeah, exactly. Just something crazy, and then you can say, all right, yeah, Chris Jericho's done, in which case he can be written off for a while and be fine, which is cool with me. Because if we are going to transition to it being basically Sammy versus MJF as opposed to Jericho versus MJF, that is something that I would definitely be okay with seeing, because again, I mean, these two guys just match up well, and having Shawn Spears there as well, he's kind of the first wave of the Pinnacle, so he's just the one to eat a fall if someone needs to get a win over the Pinnacle, which is fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. Every faction needs one. So unless you're the Four Horsemen, I guess. But I mean, yeah, that's cool with me. So who do you want to win? I'm not asking for a prediction. I'm asking for a fantasy booking here. Who would you book to win, and how?
I don't know. I feel like my fantasy booking is also what I feel is going to happen, and I think I would like to see Sammy Guevara win, because I like Sammy Guevara and I want good things for him. Mm-hmm. I think, but I also want MJF to win, because obviously I think sort of everyone's headcanon in the immediate future is Hangman Page wins the belt off of Omega, and then MJF wins the belt off of Hangman, as a parallel to the first ever belt reveal with Bret Hart, where those were the two key figures in that segment. Mm-hmm. So I think I would fantasy book having MJF win this, because I think it leads better into the story, and he needs to remain strong. He needs to look like the top guy without the belt.
Right. Yep, absolutely. And there has been a lot of criticism, in my mind, fairly, that the Pinnacle has been behind in this feud for most of the time. Ever since the Inner Circle returned, it feels like the Inner Circle has gotten the better of them, other than the obviously the Blood and Guts match where the Pinnacle clearly won. But other than that, the Inner Circle's really gotten the better of this feud most of the time. And so this, to me, feels like, whatever happens between the groups, MJF is going to be the heel of the future. I still believe 100% that MJF for the next 15 years is going to be the best heel in wrestling. I think he may very well be the best heel in wrestling now, other than Kenny Omega. I mean, they're kind of different characters. But other than Kenny, MJF, to me, when it comes to old school heels, there is no one that matches him at this point right now. And so I think, to me, you got to have him win this match. Sammy Guevara can survive a loss. We were talking about it with Jungle Boy, just to bring the whole thing full circle. MJF can survive a loss right now. Or Guevara can survive a loss. MJF needs to win this. And I feel like AEW, they understand their fans. They understand their own booking. So, to me, I feel like not only do I think MJF should win this, I think he will win this.
Yeah.
Well, Dynamite, you don't have to wait too long, because this is coming out on a Monday or possibly a Tuesday if you're watching on YouTube. Dynamite is coming out on a Wednesday, so you do not have to wait long at all to find out if we are right or wrong about this match. But whatever it was, whatever you heard, drop down in the comments. Let's discuss. I think everyone has words about the World Championship match between Kenny and Jungle Boy. It was definitely the best match of the show, one of the best matches of the year. So if it is your match of the year, or maybe even your match of all of Dynamite for AEW, let us know in the comments if you're on YouTube, or shout us out on Twitter. And to do that, then we'll have to have Jacob tell you exactly where you can find him. So Jacob, please tell the people where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at Salty Acob. It's Acob spelled AYYYCOB. When I made that name, I did not intend it to be super confusing, but apparently it kind of is. Sorry. You can also find me, I don't know if I mentioned it, in the Pro Wrestling Musing roundtable discussions every week. I didn't contribute this week because the lovely people on it did such a great job of reviewing and conceptualizing the show that I didn't feel like I could possibly make it any better. But if you want to hear my opinions, Twitter and the Roundtable.
Well, if that's not a sell to read the Roundtable, I don't know what is. That is on ProWrestlingMusings.com. Of course, it comes out after every Dynamite, much like this podcast does as well. I have been Griff from GA. You can find me over on my personal YouTube channel at General Admission Wrestling. Also, if you're into this kind of thing, I've been streaming on Twitch recently at Griff_from GA. So I know I got 2 plugs in there. I understand. I'm sorry, Craig. But yeah, so you can find me over there as well. Thank you so much for listening to the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast. We will be back talking about the first edition of Wednesday Dynamite in the last month. So keep an eye out for that. Subscribe, leave us a 5-star review on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. And obviously, if you're on YouTube, subscribe. We got some cool stuff down the pike for you. So thank you again so much for listening to the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast. We'll see you next time. We appreciate you.